Today, I sit down with someone who's extremely talented in the designing of lighting products, has helped design, build, and bring to market thousands of different lighting products. And he's my business partner and a very, very good dude, Chris Hartswick. Enjoy this episode in the business of lighting manufacturing. My name is George Stroumboulis, and I'm extremely passionate about traveling the world, meeting new people, and learning about new businesses. Join me as I sit down with other entrepreneurs to learn about their journeys. This episode of Invigorate Your Business starts now. So, we're going to start this off. We're going to jump into this. It's a podcast. It's a buzzword. Don't really like it, but it's about talking with business leaders, people who are experts in their own field. And Chris is definitely an expert in his field. And he's also my business partner. And we also started a pretty kick-ass company together 7 years ago. And Chris, first off, we're going to talk about where you're from, your background and everything. But I would love to hear the story on, how we first met. Like, how did our paths come together? If you remember.
Yeah, of course I do. George was like you were like the cool kid. I showed up. It was my first job ever.
Pre-white hair though, right?
True.
Pre-white hair, yeah.
First job ever out of school. And I didn't know how to act, right? I was like nervous. Couple weeks in, I'm like, okay, I'm like dressing up nice. I got I had my mom
sweater vests.
Yeah. Literally had like my mom ironing my pants and my shirt every day because I was living at home. I'm like, got to figure this out. Got to go find an apartment. And then in comes this European guy, like hair perfect, driving his Honda Prelude because I love that car.
Accord. It was an Accord.
Oh, was it?
It was an Accord.
I swear
Yeah,
it was a Prelude.
I brought from Canada.
Beautiful white.
Yeah.
Was,
pristine.
A lot
white.
of dents in the backseat.
Yes.
And I was like, man, this guy was like got it together. He like shows up, acts like he owns the place. I'm like, man, who is this guy? And then cracking jokes, like just fun to be around. I'm like, oh, it's gonna be sweet. This is like a new thing because before that it was just me and the owner, stuck together.
Absolutely.
And he was a nice guy as well, but it was like intimidating. Like,
absolutely.
Guy owns the company. He's like everything's on him, and it's just two of you in a room.
Just two of you. The best part is though, what I wanted to get to is your interview for that company. It was a startup, so a little background. We were part of a startup. We were part of the founding team. But the interview, when we were kind of looking at resumes and then doing background checks and how we came across Chris, I think that would frame this episode nicely on who you are.
Yeah, so this is early on. Well, maybe not super early on in social media, but this is like there was no Instagram. There was like none of that was around, right? So this is like back in the days of MySpace and all that kind of thing. And I was never been in.
Still to this day, do not have,
not in the social media. Didn't even get into it. And apparently, when I was studying abroad in school, which was my third year in university, I was overseas and making fun of my buddies that had it all. Well, I had a fake MySpace page made about myself. My friends did this as a joke. And, a bunch of stuff on there. I think I was a homosexual Buddhist. I think I had like 12 kids or something. Like just crazy things. Used to get a little wild in college sometimes. So there was like a picture of me naked with a guitar covering myself.
That was not Photoshop.
And not Photoshop. That was a real photo. But this was all part of my profile that I didn't know existed.
Yeah.
So I'm interviewing. I graduate essentially after the 2008 crash.
Yep.
Interviewing
worst time to.
Yeah. I don't know. Interviewed with 40 plus companies, probably no callbacks. Like, all right, fine. I get it. Economy.
Which, by the way, one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet and was not even getting a call back then kind of frames where the economy was at that time.
Well, in theory, or,
you just
a lot of people are, or I'm just awful and a lot of people are viewing this MySpace page. So I don't know this exists. And I finally get hired, and I want to say it was like 10 days in or so. Boss comes to me and he's like, hey, I just got to ask you, what's up with that MySpace page? And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't have a MySpace page. And he's like, yeah, you do. I was like, really? And he pulls it up on his computer, my new boss, right?
Yep.
I'm still intimidated,
Yeah.
still easing
Trying to
into this.
impress. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, boom, naked picture of me with a guitar
Air guitar.
covering it. And I'm like, oh, this is great. So of course, immediately text my buddies and they're like dying laughing. Oh yeah, I remember that. Blah,
They
blah,
did
blah."
that when you were like in school back in the
That
day.
was probably, oh man, that was probably 6 years before my job started.
Yeah.
So
Just
yeah,
living out there in
yeah.
MySpace.
Everybody forgot about it. Nobody deleted it.
See,
I'm
and
like, all right.
this is who you are. When people first meet you, it's, you know, if you don't know anyone, Chris is, very calculated, right? And the way you
Yeah,
are and the way your mind works, architecture background, very smart guy, great schooling. But then there's the extreme where he'll get naked and just play the air guitar. And that's where we
yeah,
started gelling, like, at the last startup. Like, oh man, this guy's funny as hell. Laugh with the best of them, but then he's just awesome when we turn it in, and start working what we were able to build there. And then that kind of went public.
yeah.
It was a great chapter, but like your background's incredible. So walk us through, grew up in upstate New York, you born into a family, very white collar, corporate America, like great background ish,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, started out a little, when I was younger, definitely more blue collary. My dad was doing night school when I was growing up and,
Wow.
ended up working for IBM, worked for IBM for, I don't know, 35, 36 years. Um, Worked his way up the ladder there and just like crazy in terms of computers and that whole side that I just don't understand, like way too technical, very big picture.
Right.
Um, but super analytical, super hands-on. Like even my mom, everything was hands-on. Everything was brought in-house. Nobody was hired for anything,
Right.
yard work or maintenance of the house or, cleaning of the house. Me and my sister were doing all of that stuff. Like that was just how you grew up. It was very hands-on. So I just kind of always grew up that way.
Yep.
Christmas morning used to love to put the toys together myself, take things apart. I was breaking down the lawnmower in the garage and, get my dad pissed at me and stuff like
Right.
that.
Right.
Um, but yeah, small town, farming town in the middle of nowhere. I ended up working on a farm, um, for pretty much my entire high school and beginning of college until I started doing internships and things like that. And just was kind of always in love with architecture, always, curious about, started with houses and then just how buildings are made. And, you start seeing these crazy shaped buildings. How are they actually able to hold up? So thinking about it more from the technical side, the
Right.
structural side, and how can you actually put it together? How can you enclose it and make sure it doesn't fall down?
Yep.
So went to architecture school and
RPI.
RPI, yep,
RPI. Yep. Shout
Rensselaer
out.
Polytech,
Yep.
whoop whoop, and awesome school. Met some of my closest buddies there, and
Great school though. Even when you're looking at it internationally, like great reputation.
yeah, engineering school, very technical school. All types of engineering, architecture as well, obviously, and stayed there. I guess probably my third year got exposed. They started doing, I guess, more specific classes. So got into like acoustics. You did a class on acoustics, and then you did one on lighting, sort of introductory type
Okay.
classes.
Up until then though, that was your first entry into lighting.
Yeah, from a specific standpoint, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we all interact with lights, but never really gave it too much of a thought
Right.
process. Um, and then I was working in sort of Westchester County. I had an internship in Westchester County. It was all very high end residential mansions, things like that.
Yep.
And this was after the class where I had the introduction to lighting, and they were going over things like, $6 million homes. But in terms of a drawing standpoint, it's, AutoCAD, array, a circle, and you're just putting circles in the ceiling
Sure.
on a perfect grid to signal, recessed downlight.
Hmm.
And it just kind of struck me as weird as all this thought and attention is going to every single aspect of these crazy houses, but ultimately didn't give a shit about the light.
Afterthought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, that's seems weird. Like, I've seen some pretty cool lighting things, but had no idea how they were able to accomplish that.
Right. And
Um,
this is like third year university.
yeah, third year. The internship's probably between third and fourth year, so now starting to get into senior year and thesis year. And just kind of always thinking about lights and realizing there's so much to it in terms of daylighting as well, and controls and how do you, it's not just about the physical light itself. It's not just a pretty thing, but how can you get it to interact with you? How can you get it to actually make you feel better? How can you get it to make your space better?
Right.
You can have the exact same space, but you light it 4 different ways and it looks 4 different ways. So really just got interested there and kind of stumbled on RPI also had the lighting and still does have the lighting research center, which is one of the, biggest specific lighting focused programs in the country, in the world, you could
And
argue.
you come out of there, you have your master's in lighting technology.
Yeah. So I went on, did my graduate program there, got a master's in lighting. I think the actual is, architectural sciences and a concentration in lighting or
Yep.
some really long title, but ultimately master's in
Master's
lighting.
in lighting. Yeah, that's what I roll with.
And yeah, that's where I learned about, I thought I was going to go into lighting design. So I thought I was going to go into architectural lighting design. There were big firms in New York and things like that all over the country.
Sure.
But in school, got more into sort of product design, more into fixture design and reflector design and the
Yep.
calculations behind that and optics and, all that type of stuff. And I think, again, it sort of gave me a weird nostalgic back being a kid trying to figure out how to put the toy together was
Tinkering
sometimes
around.
more
Yep.
interesting than the toy itself, right? Like being able to put it together, take it apart. Um, so I started thinking about that and, how you can not just make a light fixture, but if you're trying to accomplish something, how you can make a light fixture to accomplish what you're trying to do. Um, and it was just like a big puzzle to me. So,
And then your first job out of school is where we met,
yep.
and LED startup company, great vibe. And that was what, probably 12 years ago?
Yeah.
10?
Yeah.
12?
2010.
Yeah. And then when you look at career wise, talking about you from there until today, and now we have a company, multiple countries around the world. We have products installed in over 30 countries around the world.
Yep.
Every lighting product that we've developed has come through you, your design in coordination with the team and being able to do that. It's remarkable. Like that's a whole other show that we could talk about
Sure.
on how you do that, but being able to just look at a problem that the client has, and we're talking big multinational clients. Hey, we're trying to achieve this. We need this output. We need these aesthetics, this function, and it needs to be certified in 20 different countries. And the ability that you have from the technology aspect, and then over the years the manufacturing. Let's fast forward and the international knowledge that you gain from manufacturing overseas, specifically Asia and
Right. Well, and that's really what, it was such a huge experience for me at the first company,
right.
right, where we met is, I got into some of the fixture design, but it was more traditional company, right? So it was we were making specific products. We
Yep.
started out with just screw-in lamps,
Yep.
but there was a lot of technology. There was a lot of, the cooling and the thermal management. We were actually actively doing it, so we had fans in there.
First company in the world to
Yeah.
put a fan in the lighting product at the time, a screw-in lamp.
Especially a commercial, like a commercially available product.
Yes.
So you could buy, again, just a screw-in lamp. Fans were used again, some of these very large commercial style fixtures,
Yep.
industrial fixtures, but from something you could just screw into a standard socket in your house, definitely the first.
Absolutely. And a great team over there too. Like that was such a great chapter in our life.
Absolutely. Like the knowledge gained from, the CTO and everybody I was working with on the product side, it was unbelievable. And like you said, the manufacturing was just this whole thing I never thought I was going to get involved with, but became a huge aspect of my personal responsibilities and going overseas, setting up factories and
Like
launching
literally,
new products.
yeah. And at the time, your now wife was your girlfriend at the time.
Yep.
And you were going to China sometimes half the year on and off.
Yeah.
A good chunk of the year, setting up multiple assembly lines all over Asia specifically, and just getting that knowledge and know-how,
Yeah.
which kind of led to us launching our company Ideoli, and then expanding not just in Asia, but Southeast Asia, Latin America, and just really expanding that.
Yeah.
So talk us through, what's the basic skill set that you have when you're looking at manufacturing and setting it up, regardless of what the market is.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is really understanding like all the sort of nitty-gritty details involved in how you actually make something. So diving down into like how do you mold it, right? How do you actually bend it? How do you form it into what
Right.
you're going to do? And then once you get that one single piece, how are you going to attach it to the 14 other pieces in order to turn it into this one solid thing that you're going to offer to the
Right.
industry. Um,
All
so
coming from different suppliers too, right?
right. And once you kind of get that flow and you kind of know how to approach the manufacturers, like the parts manufacturers, how you approach the molders and how you're working with the engineers. Because again, for me, it was all, for the most part, it was more mechanical, right? Like I wasn't getting involved in designing electronic power supplies, and I
Yep.
wasn't in designing the control systems or any of the actual electronic systems. But you need all these parts, and it has to fit together, and then how do you fit it together into the shape that you
Right.
want? um, which is very challenging. And at the time when we were working at the original company, it was right when LED products were becoming commercially available, right?
Right.
So, an LED screw-in lamp was a novelty thing. It was very rare. Very few companies did it. And then all of a sudden, a million companies did it. And how do you tell what was good? How do you tell what was bad?
Absolutely. It was the Wild West at the time.
Yeah, but then it started to filter down, and then by the time we launched Ideoli, um, the industry as a whole, the lighting industry as a whole, really started to understand it. So by them understanding it, now you didn't have to talk them into it.
Right.
So now you could really start getting creative in the types of products you were going to bring out,
Yes.
and that was really the basis of what we wanted to do at Ideoli, right? It wasn't, we have a catalog, we're going to try to sell you this. It was, went back to that puzzle being the big thing. We're now working with whomever the client's going to be.
Yep.
It's going to be an architect, a lighting designer, even an end user, interior designer, whoever it is. You have some type of problem. Maybe it's an optics problem. Maybe it's a thermal problem. Maybe
Yep.
it's an installation problem. Maybe it's a pure design problem. But whatever your problem is, come to us and we'll help you solve that and make this fixture, whatever that may be, around what you're looking to get, which was just so much fun to work on and still is.
So much fun. And fun fact, in the first 5 years of our previous startup, we brought to market maybe a dozen unique fixtures,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
A dozen. In the next 5 years of our chapter at Ideoli, we've literally brought to market over 1,000,
Yeah.
easily over 1,000 different designed, engineered, certified, installed hundreds of thousands of units around the world. And the ability to do that is the methodology we've developed here
Right.
and driving it, and the basis of lighting. It's all around the basic components, right? So we understand that and what the output needs to be. It's been remarkable what we've been able to do and what you're driving over there.
Yeah.
And now even our manufacturing footprint, mild assembly here in the United States, internationally, where different molders located across. We're not dependent on just one country.
Right.
And when we first launched Ideoli, it was kind of the most magical period. We both had new babies. We both had a few bucks in the bank. We invested what we did here. The first X months we're not going to draw a salary.
Right.
And we just traveled the world on a very low budget and went to new markets to find strategic partners for different elements. And we had the balls to just go out and do that. And within a year, 2 years, we had this incredible network that we were able to do what we do
Right.
and get into major accounts, the Teslas, the Abercrombies, the WeWorks of the world, and just blow up. So it's been an amazing chapter. I think what would be awesome for the listeners is the partnership side of it and developing a company and what that looked like. Because we left the comfort zone,
Yeah.
a nice base salary. And again, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but we left that because we believed in something we could start together.
Sure.
So when we were going through that and knowing your background in corporate America, essentially, and then going all in off the deep end and starting this, like what was going through your mind when we started strategizing about this?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, building off of our personal relationship, right? And just understanding each other.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that really made sense to me, and just the way I sort of always analyze whatever I'm doing, is I was analyzing myself, and I'm pretty good in certain areas, but I'm really bad in others, right? And I don't hide that. I know where I'm bad. I know where I need a lot of help, and it was such a natural fit working with
Just a
you,
child. Yeah.
because you're the same mentality. You're very open about where you need help. You never hesitate to ask for help. You never hesitate to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yep.
Can you explain that to me? But in your own right, like from a networking business side, like that's your strong suit, and that is the exact area where I'm weakest, right? So just from a pure skill,
Was.
well,
Right? Like, think of where
sure,
it's involved.
but just from a pure skill, it made sense,
Yep.
right? So then it was like, okay, well, this kind of makes sense. And I still remember when we were talking about it, we were thinking about it, like, oh, have you ever thought about next moves? Like just started very vague
Yeah.
statements like that. And it was like, oh yeah, it'd be cool to start our own thing. And it's like, oh yeah, would you ever want to do something like that? Oh sure. Like, think we could do it together? Yeah, we probably could. Like it just,
We'd be meeting in my studio apartment in New York or the
yeah,
coffee shop,
it
and
just started naturally happening, and the conversations were good. Really good. The
yeah,
development was really good. The understanding was really good. And it kind of just meshed. It made it surprisingly easy. I mean, obviously, it's a scary thing, right? It's a
extremely
stressful
scary. Yeah.
thing.
Throwing a baby
Um,
into the mix, newly married,
yeah,
like, it's
new
not a secure.
houses.
Yeah, yeah. New
Um,
mortgages, exactly.
but yeah, it was very seamless. It was very easy from a relationship standpoint, which it makes a huge difference,
Yeah.
right? I mean, yeah, of course we've butted heads and we've disagreed about things, but like literally never actually had a serious fight.
Touch
Like
wood, man. Yeah.
never had a point where I was like, ah, fuck George, I'm not going to talk to him for the next 2 days.
Yeah.
Like we've never had that,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Well, and
Um,
not that we just never had it, because they always say in marriages and business, when there's no money, that's when problems come.
sure,
We've been through some very challenging times as a company, right? From day
absolutely,
one, when we said, hey, the first X months, we're not going to draw a salary. And then I'm going through identity fraud and all this stuff, and it delays
yeah,
stuff. Like, we've gone through some shitty times. And to be able to have that communication, we've been transparent. So, like, anyone listening, if your partnership is transparent in everything, dude, we've gone to the point where, hey, you know what? On this trip, I went over like X dollars, and we'll get it on the next one. Like, we've just been transparent
yeah,
about everything, and it's been beautiful. And that common understanding, I'm weak in certain areas, but great in others, vice versa.
right,
And we've complemented. And then the areas that we're not great at, we've just hired, right? And we build a tremendous team to support that.
right,
But partnerships going into them, I could tell you 100 horror stories from my dad's partnerships, from family partnerships, and everything. So going into it, you're always cautious. I might get screwed, or I'm good at this, or they're not going to work as hard. And that was always the challenge in the beginning. And we found a way. And now you fast forward, you're in New York, I'm in California,
right.
and we just make it work, you know?
Well, and it's also, I mean, that's a great point too. Like an added stress on all of this was we were remote from each other the whole time,
Yeah.
right? So of course we spent a lot of time together, traveling. You coming over, me going out
Yep.
here, to sit down and map all this out. But you map it out, and then for the next 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever it's going to be, you're working independently,
Yeah.
right? And you're trying to do it all through phone calls and text messages and
It's
video
challenging.
chats,
It's
and
challenging.
it's a whole different challenge
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
comes on top of it. But it's really just the trust thing. I've never once questioned what you were doing, right? I've never, in terms of anything,
Yeah.
meaning like I've never once been like, ah, is he actually doing something today? Is he actually putting in time? Or man, George has my social security number. Like
Yeah.
you literally know everything
Everything. Yeah.
about me. It's like you have my kids' social security numbers. It's
Even the markets we've gone to, it's like, should we be going to this market? Should we
yeah,
be doing that? Like, but we've always talked about it. And it's
right,
like, all right, and we're not drastic in ways. Like, even today, like, wake up first thing, Chris is like, I'm on New York time. You want to go play tennis? Awesome. We miss out on certain things like that.
sure,
But pre-pandemic, we were already a virtual company.
yep,
Right? Not to talk about the pandemic, but
yeah,
that was a challenging time just as a company, and really stressed, and put relationships on the line and company and what we're going to do.
yeah,
And if you can stay together during those dark times, how do you not succeed and grow and expand? And now, offices, New York, LA, Buenos Aires, Athens,
yeah,
Toronto's coming up in a couple months, Shanghai, south of China,
yeah.
Vietnam. Like, we were able to set this up and just really strategize together. It's been a perfect marriage, honestly.
It has been, and it's still like that. That's another just really nice thing about it that just sort of solidifies it. We're 7 years into this officially now,
Yeah.
and it's like it's still fun.
Still
It's
fun.
still we still have the same trust. We still have the same ambition. We still have the same drive.
Yep.
It's nothing's faded. Nothing's been like, I just can't wait for it to be over. It's
Hey,
luckily none of that's happened.
why do
Knock
you
on wood.
think, though? You say luckily, but I think part of it is we still had the same approach. And if we can, let's try not to work with assholes, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of it comes with if you can choose who you can work with, obviously 80-20, if 80% could be great, 20 are going to be assholes, but we've always
Sure.
given good energy, which I think attracts great energy in partnerships. Like that's
Agreed.
been part of it. And you're always going to have challenging clients, but we're working on challenging projects as well.
Right. Well, and again, I think it totally agree, but I think it also comes back to a huge thing I mentioned before on how both of us, even internally in ourselves, are very honest, even with ourselves. Because I guess technically you could say we're on like Ideoli 3.5, right? We've had to pivot several times.
Several times.
From a business, this is how we're going to approach the market, or even these are the products we're going to focus on,
Right.
or even these are the clients we're gonna go after. We've had to pivot so many different times, and we've never been sort of too stubborn to refuse to do that, right? We've never been
Absolutely.
like, no, this is the way it has to be. This is our original vision. We've been very honest with ourselves and about the company on, hey, you know what? This kind of isn't working. What if we kind of shift it
Yeah.
over here? What if we try this for a little bit? What if we try that
Extremely
for a little
fluid.
bit?
Like we've
Yeah.
been extremely fluid.
And just open, talking about that, strategizing
Yep.
together. And again, the honesty of really taking that step back and analyzing what we're doing. Is it working? Can we make it work? If not, how do we,
Yeah.
pivot to make that be successful? And it works.
Absolutely. Talk to me on team members internationally. Obviously, without the team that we have, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing and what
Yeah.
we're building and sharing in that vision and driving it. To people listening out there, it is remarkable what we were able to build internationally, have such an international footprint with such a small core team.
Yep.
The pros of what we've done, having offices in all these continents, and then what are some of the cons that we see as well that we just can't avoid?
Yeah, I think the pros and the cons, the main pro and the main con are kind of the same thing, right? The obvious time zones. Huge pro because we can essentially have one project that's being worked on 24/7,
Right.
right? Maybe 24/6, if you will. For the most part, everybody takes off
Literally
a day.
coverage 6 days
Yeah.
a week. Yep.
But the added sort of, I don't want to say stress, but the learning curve there is the overlap, right? So scheduling meetings when we're going to have this meeting, we're going to go over this project, and we're going to do it when it's the end of this person's day, the beginning of this person's day, and the middle of this person's
Yep.
day, and we're all going to talk about it together so we're on the same page. And then while you go to sleep and you're in your, cranking, I'm just going to work on it, and then I'm in my strategy session, just trying to figure out that flow, I
Totally.
think is a big challenge. Um, but it's something that we knew the markets we were going to get into, right? The Asian market, the European market, and the South American, North
Right.
American market. So we kind of had, in general, I would say 3 time zones, right? Like there's more, but
Drastic.
three main
Yeah.
groups that you're planning around. So once we sort of figure out that flow, it just kind of, you figure out the flow, and now that's your process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been successful, and I mean, to be honest, the team we have is remarkable, right? Like obviously, like any company, you have some trials and you have some errors.
Yeah.
You have to filter down and cut out the fat or whatever you want to say,
Sure.
whatever
Cliche. You want to?
stereotypical
Yeah.
cliche.
Yeah.
But for the most part, our team has been solid,
Yeah. Yeah.
and still is. And even with different cultures, even with language barriers, even with the time zones,
Holiday schedules.
yeah,
There's so many barriers to just your basic. We're in the office together.
exactly. But even with all of that, we're all like-minded. We're all similar personalities,
Totally.
and we all get each other. And again, I mean, it's a cliche in itself to say, but the communication, like just being the open, honest
Yeah.
communication and trusting each other, it's paid off,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like if you can't trust your employees, if you can't trust your business partner, then why bother?
Why bother?
It's just not worth it.
Yeah. And it just creates unwanted stress and angst
Exactly.
and your mind's not focusing on what we're trying to do.
Exactly.
When you started this, right? When we launched this together, what was your goal going into this? Like, was it, obviously there's the financial aspect and we have dreams and aspirations. We were just
Sure.
starting families, but what were you hoping to get out of this? We're still on our journey,
Yeah.
right? We're going to stay healthy, keep rocking. But what were your initial goals? And like, where are you trying to go being
On a
your own
personal
business?
level?
Yeah, personal, like obviously there's family, but yeah, on a personal level.
Yeah, great question. I mean, ultimately, starting your own company, there's the huge excitement, right? So short term was just like, oh man, this is gonna be great. We're gonna do it. We're gonna, it's gonna be a learning curve.
Entrepreneurs,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, you go through that whole Wild West exciting aspect of it, which is amazing.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong. But ultimately, I think the fear, right? What I didn't want it to become was just a job,
Yep.
right? I didn't want it to become, when's my next paycheck? I didn't want it to become, I got to go into the office today. I got to do this again. I wanted it to be something I was still learning. I wanted it to be something I was excited about,
Totally.
excited to talk about, tell people about, and be like, hey, check it out. Look what we're doing. It's so much fun. And really feel that, right?
And
Not just
feel it,
have
yeah.
it be like, oh, yeah, I got to say this because I own it.
Yep.
Um, and it has been,
It has
right? And it's
100%.
been amazing. And I think a lot of that is also just the business model. For me, coming from the technical side, it's literally right now, today, we're designing streetlights. At the same time, we're designing very decorative lobby chandeliers. At this,
Massive.
yeah, like big installs,
Yep.
more of an install than a fixture. At the same time, we're designing, decorative sconces, and it's just the range of product that we're able to touch is
Facades,
amazing.
exterior building
Yeah.
facades with controls.
Yeah, where you're essentially designing the control system more than the fixture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's so many different challenges all happening at the same time. So many different curveballs being thrown in to keep it interesting and 100% learning again from me personally,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
learning an entire new control system. How does this work, right?
Absolutely.
How can we use this to make our fixture better, and how can we make our fixture make the control system better? All to solve that puzzle of what the
To
client's
that.
looking
Yeah.
for.
And impress the client and have
Yeah.
a good install. Internationally, right? When we were starting this, personal goals, right? Very similar and wanted to be proud, wanted to do all this, but I've always wanted an international presence, right? I used to live overseas and we've built that. When going international, what were you've lived abroad, you've done Italy, you've done all this, but when we were starting to take our business there and we had our first hire in a different country, different time zone, different culture,
Right.
what were some of the issues or challenges you were facing internally and even doing that? Because it's not easy.
It's not easy. And not being there, not being able to be there all the time
Right.
is a challenge, right? Even in terms of whether it's from our office or our employees to our clients,
Yep.
right? To try to service a client when you maybe meet them once a month if you're flying over to England or something, wherever the client is, it's hard to service them when you're not in front of them, right? Because and we've had that challenge from the beginning. Being just outside of New York City, you can hop on a train and be there in 30 minutes and you meet with your client and great, right? Hey, got a quick question. You want to meet for a coffee? You can't do that
Yeah.
overseas. Same thing from an employee standpoint. Hey guys, you know what? Something's not working out. Let's all meet in the conference room and let's just whiteboard this.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, let's set up a video call and I'm going to try to aim my camera at a whiteboard
And
and
I'm
try to
doing,
draw it so you
yeah.
can understand it. And
And I'm
hopefully the
doing math
Wi-Fi
on,
doesn't go out.
right. And the math on the time zones. Like,
Right.
wait, he's here, they're
Exactly.
there. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's, obviously a huge challenge.
Yeah.
But again, I think once we kind of figured out that flow, it's
Absolutely.
worked.
And big markets for us have been Europe, Greece, obviously background, but we go in there, big meetings, doing big projects, and then you leave. It's like you're physically not here. We'll see you again in 3 months or 6 months.
Right.
That's why Canada is a huge market for us. Obviously, the United States,
Mhm.
but as we navigate, it's been great. So in looking at this, you recently gave a talk on lighting, the manufacturing at your at RPI,
Yeah.
right? So you've always been, you love teaching people, even new employees come in that environment, you thrive on that, right? So talk to me about being able to go back and teach the next generation where you were sitting 10, 12 years ago,
Sure.
right? And how important that is, because you said one thing earlier, you're still learning because you
Yeah,
still want to learn.
absolutely.
How important is that? Because if we're not learning every day, then what's the point?
Yeah, and it's I've been fortunate enough throughout pretty much all the major areas of my life to have phenomenal teachers, right? Even just growing up and, my parents teaching me how to be a person,
Yeah,
right? And teaching me how to do things, even, more specifically, my dad teaching me how to tinker around the house and, my mom teaching me how to put things together. My parents started obviously teachers, getting into architecture school, starting to focus more in on kind of how my career went. Phenomenal teachers in architecture school.
let me pause you right there. The teaching right now, you're late 30s. Your father, after a tremendous career, big company, still going back to learn,
Yeah,
right? Like it's amazing when you see that. Like still keep learning, keep going. Doesn't matter how old you are.
absolutely. And no matter what that is, it's like, even lighting. Lighting from when I was 12 years ago, 13 years ago in grad school learning about lighting,
Right.
technology is different,
Yep.
right? Like, yeah, okay, there's some common themes, but it advances so much, especially now that lighting has become technology,
Yep.
right? Meaning lighting is now electronic. Lighting, it's not just a filament and you heat it up and there's so much. Computers advance, TVs advance, everything's getting smaller and bigger and,
Yep.
advancement of screens. Lighting is now part of that same process. You blink and 6 months later, now there's an entire new technology out there. Maybe it's a control system, whatever that is. There's so much to learn. You can't, if you stop learning, you're dead in the water,
Dead on the
right?
water.
And unfortunately, or I guess depending on how you see it, we've seen that on even certain companies out there, right? Companies that were very focused on fluorescence or very focused on whatever it may be, and they were sort of behind the curve on advancing and working into LEDs and
Right.
working into more modern technologies, and some of them failed.
Yep.
Some of them went out of business, which is unfortunate because they were great companies and phenomenal people working there. Um, but I guess just going back into that is, even at where we met at our first job, the people I was learning under, my bosses were tremendous,
Jeez.
just the smartest guys you could ever
Give Dr.
imagine.
J a shout out. He's
Yeah,
yeah.
in terms of the lighting industry and technology and even on the business side and things like that, it's unbelievable sort of the access I had from that level. And again, in grad school, I mean, the Lighting Research Center, at first, to be honest, I took it for granted a little bit because I was already at RPI and I'm like,
Right.
oh, am I really going to stay at the same school for my graduate
Yep.
program? But, started doing research into it and holy cow, this tiny little school within the university is the foremost, you know, technology based research institution in the world for lighting. And
Well, and then you jumped into the industry after obviously
sure.
graduating. And I bet you in the industry, when you would hear how much they were referencing this institution, your professors, you probably
Yeah.
realized even more that, wow, this is the forefront of lighting research.
I mean, call it luck or whatever, but the owner of the company where we met at, like, he went to that school specifically to recruit
Yeah.
somebody to hire. It wasn't that I just randomly put in my resume and he happened to find it
Right.
and reach out. It was he went to that
Yeah.
university to find somebody, hopefully find somebody to hire, and he hired a few people from that
Yeah.
school. Of everybody there, I think there was at least 3 of us that came out of the Lighting Research Center.
Yeah. Even now, we
Um,
have a few people on our staff that
yeah,
come from there.
absolutely.
So from the education, what's some final advice we could leave with people for new people coming up, following architecture? Like, what's your case for people getting into lighting? Why? And what are some things that you see that are mistakes, whether it's through presentation, how you're presenting yourself, being too eager? What's advice if your son or daughter was sitting there wanting to get into this industry?
Right.
How would you guide them?
Well, yeah, I think, to be honest, I think the advice goes even outside of the industry, right? Outside of lighting. And this is actually kind of when I was fortunate enough to work with the Lighting Research Center and to do sort of, participate in their lecture series. Um, Kind of my biggest sort of message I was trying to put out there is just do it, right? And we even do that in terms of Ideoli. Don't if you sit there and you wait and you try to develop and you have your blinders on and you keep trying to redesign, you can redesign over and over
All
again,
day.
whether
Yeah.
that's architecture, whether it's, car design,
Yeah.
whether it's a new video game, right? You can sit there and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak, but until you start getting real feedback, right? Until you start putting something in the industry, seeing how people are going to use it, touch it, see it, interact with it, whatever it is you're making,
Right.
you need to get that feedback. So it's so much better. And again, kind of how we built our process Ideoli. How many times in a single project, how many rounds of prototypes do we? How many rounds, even if it's just, hey, here's a metal square that has a custom finish on it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's you got to get that feedback. Oh, can it be a little darker? There's so many comments you can get, no matter how simple it is, that physical thing you're doing or drawing or whatever it is. Do it and get it out
Yeah.
into somebody else's hand.
Get it to 80 or 90%. Because
Exactly.
if you're trying to get to 100, it will never be 100 in their eyes.
Right.
And the minute you include them in that process, they're engaged.
Exactly.
And that's how we built our business.
Exactly. And no matter how much time you spend, there will always be feedback.
Always.
So get the feedback sooner, and then it just makes the development process that much more efficient. Because to your point you mentioned before about the number of products we've come to market with, that's not just because we're working harder, right? It's we've made that process so much faster
So, yeah.
because we're not taking 18 months to come out with a new product line. It's, hey, we're gonna do a sketch. We're gonna send it out. What do you
Yeah.
think about that? Not right? Do another sketch. Send it out. Yeah, you like that? Let's develop it.
Yeah.
Render, drawing, prototype, prototype, prototype. It's
And we're talking from one massive chandelier to hundreds of thousands of units of a production run.
of course, yeah.
But when you have that same approach, you're able to scale it up.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying I don't think it's just the lighting industry. I think it's whatever you're into, right? Find out what you're passionate about, as
Right.
as much of a cliche that is, but find out what you're interested in, and whatever that is. When you're trying to develop it, when you're trying to launch it, just do it.
Yeah.
Right. Just put it out there. Again, even in terms of the business, right? We launched the business, wasn't quite working. Let's pivot a little bit. You're getting the feedback, and you're using that.
Absolutely. And then the other thing is when you're finding partnerships, you got to have the same background. You said it in the beginning. You grew up property, upstate New York. You were out there, you were helping clean, building stuff, doing it. My background's restaurant. I was sweeping, doing tables like
Yeah.
from a young age. When we came here, we were never too proud to say, well, I run the company or I'm co-founder and I'm
Right.
not. We were sweeping warehouses. We're doing stuff. We're even to this day, we
Still,
do
yeah.
stuff to keep things going. And then we set a tone with the team. Well, if the boss is doing it, then I'm going to do it too.
Right.
And we create a culture like that versus just sitting there and directing. Like you create by leading.
Well, and surrounding yourself with like-minded people, right? Because even the people we hire, it's, we're not hiring a CAD designer and all they do is CAD work.
Right.
Our CAD designer may be helping us, ship out a shipment
Yeah.
next week. It maybe like
And make a mean
everybody.
double espresso. Maybe that's what they got to do.
It's, everybody here knows it's still, even though we're 7 years in, we still have that startup vibe, right?
Totally.
Like, yeah, you're good at something, but let's learn every aspect. Let's help with every aspect, and let's help where needed. And if you're not willing to do that, then, that's not the personality we're looking for, and it's not a fit.
And it's not a fit. Yeah. 100%.
But yeah, it's great when you figure out your process, when you get it down, you're honest with yourself about what you're good at, and you surround yourself with like-minded people that
Yep.
can really support you. I mean, you can't not be successful in whatever you're trying.
Absolutely. So from Chris personally on a professional level, I think that's an oxymoron, but
okay.
we'll go with it. What's next? Like you enjoyed having, a class and educating them. You love that stuff.
Yeah.
What would you like to do on that side of it? Do you see yourself lecturing? Do you see yourself speaking about the technology? Like what's next for you?
I mean, it was so much fun. I don't think I could ever be a full-time teacher. I think I just like to have my hands dirty, if you will.
Yeah.
I like to manufacture. I like the products. I like what we're doing. But that lecture series was a lot of fun. I would love to do that more.
Right.
And again, just thinking about, how much I've learned from pure experience and from the people I've been fortunate enough to be around, I would just love to share that with other people. And
Totally.
you share it with 20 people, and maybe a handful of them get it and react to it and respond to it. But it's I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, in pre-pandemic, we started doing the student competitions
Yeah,
where we were launching it in Europe, Southeast
yeah,
Asia here. It was this beautiful platform where, we were basically having students design certain elements, and why we were doing different markets, because we see it right now. We have a team in the US, we have one in Europe, we have one in Latin America, China. Everyone has their own design flair.
right.
The American typically thinks different than this group, but when you have a team like that, everyone's adding their own flair. So,
Absolutely.
that whole design series that we're going to launch now again, we're going to see some incredible stuff.
Right. And regardless of my background or degrees that I have, it's every time we're designing these projects at Ideoli, it's a collaborative process, right? We're
Always.
we're together, and everyone has equal say. Everyone has, their own input on, maybe it's purely aesthetic, maybe it's technical, maybe
Something.
it's how it physically assembles. But having that collaborative process and really understanding the way everybody sees it is making a stronger product
Yes,
as a result. And again, helping all of us learn individually, like, oh, that's a great point, or what you said here really makes a lot of sense.
absolutely. As a first episode, as launching this, it's amazing. Thank you for flying in, getting your
Of
ass kicked in
course,
tennis. I'm scared
of
for the
course.
next one because you're only getting better. And
It's my first time on
it's
the
your
court.
first time, and
It
you
was
did
fun
awesome.
though. I'm ready. I gotta start stretching.
We got to start stretching. Chris has a flight back to New York right now.
Yeah,
But the next stuff, I would love to create a series where we talk about how we won this account and what
sure.
that took. I think it's just good content to create for everyone.
Be a lot of fun.
We'll keep it coming, man.
I like it.
Love you, brother.
Same here, George.
Yeah.
Really do.
It's good. I'll get out.
Mm.
This is good.
Mm-mm.
Boom. Chris Hartswick.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Invigorate Your Business with George Stroumboulis. Please hit the subscribe and like buttons and follow me on all the main podcast streaming channels. Also, please share your comments when you can. I appreciate your help in expanding this network to a worldwide audience. Until next time, stay invigorated.